They're entering to the system and now they sign out. When they had proposed this model, we weren't talking about computers nor communication systems. This tool is the main that has been used to analyze all communication systems. And to see how many channels they are using. And that is the tool that has been used for all of this. But it could also be used for some other applications with some communication systems, as I told you. A brief introduction to this. Here we have an agenda. And with these three examples that I selected, in the part of communication, so we can model with all this. So we have the theory of things and the queuing theory, which is the queue of the bank, or some other practical examples, which could also be deformed. And it developed in France. But these turned out to be something that with time evolved into an English theory. With this type of systems, and they realized that with these telephonic systems, although there were a lot of people forming in rows, after that they are processed, and then we have the basic extensions, which are also part of current systems of telephones, and with some additional variables. And also some satellite networks, which were focused to give some communication services, to make it directly. But sometimes now there are a lot of those systems that are no longer in use. There was a time in which all those systems were still working, but not that common now. So we're taking all these systems back. And here we have a communication system in which there was a lot of package traffic and intercommunication with some machines. But we could also use this. It is also worth mentioning that there was a change, a sudden change from this point up to this point. We're talking about communications from person to person. If you hanged a phone, for example, you had to call the number again so you could establish again the communication. And that's how it evolved. But you're no longer accustomed to this. It was simply designed like that. But when Wi-Fi came to existence and some other systems, those are nodes, no longer persons, but there's not a communication one-to-one, but to several points, access points. You can send an email and it could reach a couple of hours then. So it was a sudden change. And with the theory of queues, as had stuff being used because there was this term called exponential distribution, which have the property of not having the same storage or memory. A few of them have it, actually. And you could correct me if I'm wrong, but these systems tend not to have a lot of memory. But most of it is based on this queuing system. So when we're talking about these phone systems, which are just given conceived like that, we have that property, which means that exponential distributions are directly affecting it. We're talking about types of arrival, of services, which are distributions based on exponentials. And when they are sending something more complex, such as several notes or emails or whatever, that it is no longer a person, that exponential distribution is broken. We have then another type of distribution, according to this theory, because those services are no longer in use. And some couple of years then, they still use this, but not directly. And they still use it. So if you could see some of the articles that have been published that come from 1910 up to 1990s, and then from 1995 to 2005, because we're talking of these systems as they had this burst, this explosion of breakthroughs with all the computer systems. And this traffic of with a lot of information that could be modeled with some arrangements. There are some services that have these sort of things. And if we still use this exponential distribution, well, we could create even larger variables. So there's not enough communication among people, person to person, but they're sending information, actually. So what is teletraffic? We have basically three main points, key points. The arrivals, how much time does it pass from one to another with phone keys, whether it's a query or a delivery, which is a good approach to get this. If we know how to get this arrival process, how much time, what is the length of it, and for example, how much time following that same model of queues, how much time does a person spend making a queue? How much time they are during and inside the system. And the other process is or there could also be a policy of these queues or nodes that are more important. So here we have this policy, which are within the system. And it goes directly with these phone systems. But it could also be extended to package systems. This is no longer in use because wireless systems have a lot of different features. We have these phone systems. We have a lot of voice systems. But what is truly separating them from the others, from the previous ones? So they had different kinds of coverage. There were calls that faded, but not because they hanged, but because they were changing of base stations. And nowadays it is something mandatory, something that, well, all of these communication systems already have. They have a lot of intake rates, outtake rates. Also, if we're talking about sensor systems, could also be work with vehicle networks. It's just to imagine that they all have different traffic features. So I'll give you an example. This is the exponential distribution, which is what has been generating the traffic, and the Poisson traffic, which is a consequence, a mathematical consequence between the times of arrival and services and whether they have an exponential distribution or not. These processes tend to be exponential, and if it is negative, they tend to go down, which means that there's a lot of services, could be small, could be, and the larger ones have more likeliness to occur. So we're talking about these systems, phone systems, and as I told you, you're not accustomed to them, but most of the calls that they made were just from a couple of seconds or not very long. We could better yes. And most of communications that you already have are quick. And just a few of them do not last more than half an hour. That is what exponential distribution is showing. If it is not exponential, then you have other kinds of distributions. They're no longer focused in zeros. They could be displaced to some other values. And long phone calls do not have that likeliness as the ones that have that exponential distribution. You could spend just a few minutes watching a video. It is no longer the same as it was before. These kind of tools, I was telling you, when Wi-Fi came and Bluetooth, for example, they were no longer exponential. There was an inferent data exchange, so they could still be used with these three of queues. And we've been using this tool with some thesis works, so we can model other kinds of systems. IPN has collaboration with NASA, in which they are allowing us to fulfill an experiment task of the satellites that they are sending. NASA is sending some air balloons, so we can also submit our experiments. In which we can send them, and well, they will be approved by NASA. Which is the program of the IPN to submit all these kind of petitions. We also have some measurements of microplastics. That's other of the practices. And it emits 6. They send a camera to detect the particles in this experiment of microplastics. And suddenly, well, it dropped abruptly, and they could obtain all these samples.
When landing and in a trajectory, the camera was freed and it took a lot of pictures where they completely blurred. But everything worked out. So one of the jobs that we are doing here is modifying and identifying and to be able to calibrate all the satellites when they have functions once it's already launched out this trajectory and measured all the climate changes, and then we are able to measure it. So one thing is to have these experiments of microplastics that are independent from the camera. So in this case, an experiment was working out, but it didn't work either because the battery was suffering a lot with all the temperature changes because they were drastic, and it died, such as the experiment as well. So the experiment had to be working out before the satellite to be launched on because the box was closed. So NASA lent us this balloon. So we need it to work it before launching it. And that was proved as well. The experiments, such as the research, were working out, and it was a really brave try from us. So, what we want here is to do obtain an idea of how much energy will the experiment consume, how much time will the experiment will spend time, and once we know the energy that will consume, we can make the battery to work completely correctly in order to power it. So that's what we are doing here. So how can we do it in here? Here we have 3 presentations. The first one could tell me the difference among these 3 will win something. Well, here I have some white points. Maybe you cannot see them, but if you can tell me at least one small idea among the difference between these 3, someone? Can you see it? I already came ready for this. Yeah, exactly. This is the way it is right now. The experiment, it is supposedly for the white point to be the component, to be working all the time, all the trajectory where the satellite is turned on to face the micro components. So that is where the it starts working. All the things that are against us, that we haven't measured, and that we haven't experimented, even though they are basic, is that the microplastics are rent in the same way. The microplastics are located in industrial areas when you're going through a forest, through a river, and maybe you face microplastics, but not that much. So with the superstition, won't be totally uniformal. So if it's not the same, this is where our proposal came for the satellite could collect less when there are more. Because there are more, it could be turned off because this experiment has a camera that could be measuring how many microplastics are entering this way. So every time that it's moving, we could open it in order to see how much they are entering. So every single particle will consume energy in an electronic way that we are generating. So microplastics plus the camera functioning will be measuring. So that's what we are modulating in here for all these traders that are getting. So if we have many particles, in the case that we have many phone calls, then the experiment will be functioning in a really intense way. So if we don't have any articles, it will happen in a lower way so we can control the energy that we are spending in here, such as in the school, in IPN. So if someone hurries up and when the experiment is happening, then you can round it to 8, or you can round it and you can get to an average way into knowing what you're doing. So this could control the traffic in such sectors such as Wi-Fi. So this could be a really similar or close solution for this. So it could have sense because maybe you can ask yourself if it has some, but with among these you could make this work. So we will use this tool. So here's a small idea where there are some when the density of the particles when you're in a zone of many microplastic high density for a certain time that you will model in an exponential formula. This is only a guess because we don't know exactly how much time it will take in here with the experiment, or we don't have any idea of how to measure it. If it is exponential, if or we don't know how much time exactly will be interact with the other variables. And then we will go over there with a lower than the city in a lower time, and then we will go right there with another. So here we have 3 variables. This is basically what the all the winds, well, all the we because we have a lot of vehicular traffic, because there will be times where there are no rivers, where there are no communication systems, and they will be used to model all the traffic and communication networks. So now we will analyze it in order to analyze the energetic consumption with these variables. So this will be the chain that will be modeled in certain area with certain density, and this is where the microparticles will come. And then with these microplastics will be obtained. And in any moment, the satellite will go through another area with another density and will take with it another particles and will go on and will go on with different densities, recollecting the microparticles until it achieves all the density. So this is the completely change with all the continuous time, which is transitory in itself. Because when we get into any of these two states, there is a state where the chain cannot go off. And this is where the experiment gets to its end. To know how much time it takes to get to the other point. So we're getting with the tail theory using the networks, the microparticles experiments. Another use that we have used for the tail theory is that the security area is using the information from their smartphones via sound. So we're using a room like where we are right here. They are connect their cell phones, and then the cell phones get to send the information not via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, nothing wireless, because the wireless leave mark. So the smartphones could know when the information exchange took time in. And then how to extract information via sound, like it was a document where it includes the sound. So you take it with sound. The problem here is that the sound or the audio gets a limitation. When you're listening to any music, you could feel your cell phone. So if you have in your cell phone and someone is hacking you through the sound, you could feel that there's something here. So this software only works if the cell phone is remaining still, and that's how it could extract information through the sound wave without the person noticing. So if we use this type of activity, how good will the software will be? It will be as good as the person is using the cell phone. Because if the person is not using the cell phone, then there won't be information to take off. But otherwise, if the person is using it a lot, then the information will be taken a lot. And we can obtain information with this type of attack. So this is a chain that we graphed in here, but we're modeling it here. There are incomings from the people that are arriving with the cell phones. How much information will we extract if there are many users in the same zone? It could be more less common if there are many people. We have a lot of that range because of depending on how much people is present in that zone. If they are using the cell phone in a really intense way, then we won't be able to get to the information. And then we won't be doing the attack in a more efficient way. So we are modeling in this transitionary way. And then we can get to the result of how much information we will extracting with these graphics. So with this, our colleagues in the laboratory, Saber, will get to the conclusion that if we are in a certain zone with these certain variables, how much information we'll be able to extract from these really, really close attacks. But if you are an expert in mathematics or with computers, you will be able to do it. But I'm not. I'm not an expert in this. I only do the graphics. And then when I achieve the higher points in the it, if the cell phone are not doing it, if they are not getting enclosed, this is information that we'll be getting. Because in this zone could be higher points, so we cannot assure that is the maximum point. But in this range, when we are studying the system, we could analyze the highest points. So these are only some kinds of the graphics that we are doing in order to identifying the systems. But this is not how many information we are extracting in an illegal way from the cell phones. Yeah, it's not that bad that you are addicted to your cell phone. It's easier for you to get, for someone to get information from you, but that's okay. So another way is to get information through drones. Even though we're using drones, drone hives for to assist communication systems, these mathematics systems is being used for all the mobility of these drone hives. So here we have an animation. If you can help me to get to make to play the animation. I was playing with AI like for 2 hours, and this was the best I could achieve with it. So in here, if we have all the drones coming together, and then they face a challenge. In this case, the challenge is a building, and they have to separate itself because they have to get away from the building. And well, I was able to use AI, but I wasn't able to control for them to go through it after it. And also, it's expensive. So for it not to be so expensive, I only could try it 3 times a day. So the third time that we are making it, I spent 24 hours in this.
You can see it separated, the drone separated, but yeah, didn't understand me for them to separate it to after the building and then they get back together. You can give me tips on how to practice on my computer. But basically, what we are doing here is that when the drones are separated because of an obstacle, the condition, or the wind, the time that they spend separated has a certain impact on the hive drone. And they have to do another things, but we are also analyzing this particularly using blockchain to make the register of all the events that are occurring on the hive. When the hive drone is separated and we have different groups of drones, we are generating 3 or 4 different blocks. And when they are get back together, that blockchain is good because I didn't generate it. I didn't value this data and all these protocols of consents. The most time that they are separated, all the drones get back together. So the time that they spend separated is a important parameter. And we are modeling this with this chain. This is the chain that we are proposing to model the dynamic of the drones, that the drones are being together on a certain time. In some time, something is occurring, and we don't have the nodes on the principal group, but we have several number of nodes on the person on the first, and we have separated groups. And then as they are getting back together, we have different numbers on a first group that they were on the other, or the others that form the first group, and etc. So the idea is that we have different control algorithms so they can get back together on the hive drone. So with these algorithms, we can make them get back together after a certain time on the first nodes that were separated. And with this, we can model all the events that are occurring, that are going into the blockchain on each different groups that are on the system. They got first together, or the next one, or the next ones. But there are always different concepts, algorithm concepts on this chain. So we don't have communication in here neither, and we I was telling you that the drones are example for the sensors, but we are not making communication with this model of traffic. But we are only modeling the dynamic of the drones where they are being separated. So this is has to be with the part of blockchain that we can have the protocols of consent, the groups that were being separated and they got back together. But this is pretty interesting because all the drone hives are not only useful to have information, but also to have a substitute of these fireworks. But this is something that we are going to use all the time. And all those figures that you see in the sky, they can separate it. They are going to be reunited as soon as they can, just for the show. So you can see this model to tell how time they can get back together. So my time is up. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that this was interesting for you in a manner of a mathematic tool. And here on the center, I have seen a few colleagues using this tool, and this is a very useful tool for this spectrum. Thank you very much.
Estocásticos.
Oh my God, what is that?
Creo. Esto sí.